Today on the Price Sell Paint podcast, we are talking about the fact that you probably need to raise your price. Too many people in our industry are not charging what they are worth. You deserve to make a profit. You deserve to be able to take care of your employees and your family. And here's the shocking news. You might actually sell a higher percentage of your jobs. Jon and I are really passionate about this topic. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the calculations and the psychology behind pricing jobs to run a profitable, successful business.
Welcome to Price Sell Paint, the go-to podcast for painting contractors and sales professionals in the painting industry. Hosted by industry experts Jon Bryant and Michael Murray. This podcast is proudly powered by PaintScout, your partner in painting success.
All right, welcome back to the Price Sell Paint podcast. I'm Jon Bryant here with Michael Murray. For those who don't know us, guys, we've been in the industry now for 40 years, something crazy like that. We've got some experience. We'd love to share it with you. And today we're talking about a topic that's pretty near and dear to our hearts, which is you got to raise your price. Let's charge more money. Michael, what do you think about when I say that?
Long overdue. I think one of the biggest weaknesses in our entire industry is this misunderstanding of like trying to stay busy, that if I'm just busy, eventually I'm going to make money. And unfortunately, as I personally experienced with low prices for way too long in my own company, that's not actually how it works, that you need to be charging a fair price, a correct price. And if you can't find work at that price point, you need to improve your sales skills, which we are all about here, or you need to go find something else to do. Because there's no point in being in this industry, not making money. We are all working way too hard with way too much risk. And our team members are, right? As business owners, the people that work for us deserve to have a really good wage with good benefits, great place to come to work. And the only way that we can make that happen is by charging the right price.
Totally. So I'm excited to talk about this too, because I see the same thing you do, which is that a lot of people confuse busy with success. And then I guarantee they get to the end of the year and they talk to their accountant and they're like, my goodness, I lost money. Well, at least we were busy. Like it doesn't work for me. Like we're running businesses here. People need to understand that like this is built as a profit-making endeavor. This isn't a charity. And I think what a lot of people get wrong is they think, what's the price that's going to get me the job, right? Ultimately, it's like,
Lowest.
That's the lowest. What's the price I need to charge so the customer is like, never going to not choose me? And so it's this like race to the bottom in our industry that really gets me charged up to be like, we got to do something about this as a whole industry, because like you said, our time is worth way too much. Our effort is worth way too much. And the big part of this is figuring out how to price. Like we see, time and time again, people are pricing too low to get a job, not realizing that maybe that customer only got one estimate. and so today I want to really get into this and figure out how to just share what we know with the audience in order to get them to a place where they feel comfortable and confident to charge the price they're worth. So I know we've talked about this a little bit before, the price you're worth versus the price that everyone should charge. What are your thoughts there?
When you say what everyone should charge, you're saying like maybe what the market is charging, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, like a market price, that there's like this special price that everyone should charge. I know we've talked before, and I think you're passionate about this idea that like your company is not my company. Our price is not going to be the same. Maybe walk the listeners through that, because I think we've talked about before, and the way you talk about it really resonates with me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, where my thought goes here is, so one of the best things about being a business owner is that we get to like shape out of clay, if you will, this idea of a great place to come to work. My own personal journey. So I've been doing this. I've run my business since 2006. For the first about 10 to 12 years, we had a really unprofitable, not fun business that I worked way too hard in. We, for the most part, were busy and we didn't make any money. I didn't make any money. At the end of all of that, we were, and I had hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. And I think at that point, like really the only people that had any real satisfaction were like my Sherwin-Williams vendors, because I was buying a decent amount of paint. My employees weren't having a great experience because they weren't paid as much as they should be, and they didn't have any benefits at that point, and I wasn't making any money, and it just like sucked. We didn't have any like management level opportunities for people because we weren't able to afford to grow. And so what I decided at that point was I really had a couple choices. One of them was to go bankrupt because I owed so many people money. I really didn't want to do that, probably just out of like pride and ego. I didn't want to admit that I had failed so poorly. But I also think that I realized that like there is opportunities for people to be successful in this industry. And I think a lot of it, once I got more involved in the industry through PCA, through Nolan Consulting, through some Facebook groups and things like that, I realized there's people out here that are running good businesses, and I've seen their numbers. Like, this isn't just, bravado at the bar at the expo, maybe people inflating numbers. It's like, no, this is real. And a lot of these people I was meeting didn't seem to be, these super magician, Steve Jobs-esque business titans or whatever. They hardworking, good people that had just something figured out that I didn't. And so what I decided, to do was I said, all right, you know what, I'm going to fix this, and I'm going to create a business that I want to come to, and that will attract people to come work here that I want to work with, and will attract the type of clients that I want to work with. And so I sat down, I thought about that, like, what does that mean for me personally? Some of the things that I wanted to be able to provide for myself as well as for our team members were like health insurance, retirement plan, paid time off. I wanted us to be able to afford to buy like, decently nice vehicles. Didn't have to be brand new, but I didn't want to be driving around in like a, rust bucket that was breaking down all the time. We had a couple of those, 10 years ago, because that's all we could afford. And, I wanted to be able to have a decent office. I wanted to be able to have some office staff, certainly like some people around me that could do some of the other things. We talk a lot about hiring sales reps. I
Mhm.
didn't want to work 60 plus hours a week. I wanted to be able to spend time with my family and my, at that point, really young kids, now getting older kids, and, all the things. And so I sat down and I said, all right, what does that cost? Like, what would that look like? And then from there, I started to figure out what I should be charging,
Mhm.
as opposed to saying, here's how much customers say they're willing to pay, which I think is a really interesting point that we need to come back to at some point, because
Mhm.
customers are lying to you. But, or sorry, instead of saying, what is a customer willing to pay? And then working backwards from there and saying, like, okay, with my few pennies that I have left, what are the things I can afford? Is saying, nope, not doing that anymore. I'm going to say, this is the business I'm going to have. And if I can't sell work at the price that I need to have that business, I will go find something else to do.
Mhm.
And what I found is still doing it. And there's plenty of people that are willing, and not only willing, like excited to pay a good, higher price for a great company and a great experience.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's
What are your
it's.
thoughts?
I mean, I like obviously you and I are aligned in this concept, and there's a few points in my life where this became really apparent. And to your point, the first year I did this, I mean, I wanted to go bankrupt. That was my goal. I wanted to learn what it was like to run a business. And let me tell you, the painting business is pretty easy to go bankrupt at. So if you're looking to do that same thing, definitely start a painting business. The thought processes that occurred to me were, number one, how much should I get paid per hour? And so I was like, oh, okay, well, if I just got paid a little bit more than I might make somewhere else, that should be good. Like that was my first thought process. I remember that vividly. And it wasn't until I got like we were busy, like I was working with a couple of friends, we were busy throughout the summer. I was so proud of that. Got to the end of the summer, having charged like just a little bit more than I was paying the staff, and charged the paint out without a markup, which we can talk about that too. That my accountant was like, "Hey John, congratulations, you lost thousands of dollars." And outside of my goal of like learning what it was like to have failure, it was a shell shock for me. It's like, oh wow, this is how easy it is to lose money. And so it wasn't until similar to you that I was experienced that I was exposed to production rate estimating and how my hourly rate for my time reflected my business and how to calculate that, that I could put those two things together where I could figure out how long a job would take, figure out how much my time was worth based on my company, and to your point, the values that I had, the company structure that we were looking to do, I could put those together and consistently make money. And that was a game changer. Like that moment, it was a pivotal moment in my life to say, you know what? This makes sense. This finally makes sense. It's not square footage pricing because I couldn't figure out why that actually translated to my business values. It wasn't random days of people's work where I just like ballparked, oh, this is 6 days. Oh, it turns out it's 10. Oops. That sucks. And so I need, once I got exposed to that, like I can't even begin to tell you the change in my life that occurred. And it sounds similar to yours, where it's like I could actually attract the customers I was looking for. I could attract the staff that I felt like the team that was going to make this thing really come to life. We could actually have like a mission and a vision and all this other stuff. This wasn't like a, geez, if I don't cut corners tomorrow, I'm going to lose my house kind of situation. And so that was really, really important. The other thing that I will say in this discussion is that inherently, like a diamond is a rock. What is the price of a diamond? Do you know?
A lot.
Like it's a rock. Like this is a made up value system. And once you kind of understand that like the diamond now has certain cuts and certain, clarity and all this other stuff that's also all made up, by the way. Now it costs different amounts, that we can start to understand how marketing, how sales actually impact the value of a business. And it's not just a commodity. Diamonds aren't a commodity. In fact, if you go and look at like the Tiffany box, like a Tiffany diamond ring, I don't know, what does a Tiffany diamond ring cost these days? Do you know?
I
I'm
don't know. I can say that like my wedding anniversary is coming up here soon, so I don't know if my wife got to you and put you on the spot
Mhm.
here. I feel like
Yeah, you feel like you're on the
I feel
spot.
like I'm gonna have to raise my prices here again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. But
I don't know, what, 25,000? I
that was what I
mean,
was going to say.
more than that, probably. I don't know.
25K.
Okay.
And I've heard this analogy before, where if you take that diamond out of that box and you go get a ring that you got in a Cracker Jack box, they're the same design, whatever, whatever. You throw that in a paper bag and shake it around. You bring that out. The average person can't tell which is the Tiffany diamond and which one isn't.
Yep.
And so that box that cost them $2 probably, who knows, it could be less, is actually worth probably $24,900 to the whole process. That diamond, obviously there's processing and whatever else, but they're making the value of their brand through the delivery of that product. And what I think a lot of us here in the industry get wrong is we think that our product is our value. Our product is not the value. Like we got to stop thinking that. The product is what the value is in the customer's mind and how they perceive your brand, how they perceive what they're going to receive at the end. It could be, the trust factor, your reputation, the way you do things, the way you handle color, massive deal to customers. These are value builders that don't have a dollar value, and we can't figure out what that is to the customer until we help build it in the process.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's also taking that one step further. Like you've probably heard this like in a sales setting or sales book before. If you're selling blenders, don't sell the blender, don't sell the blades and the motor. Sell the healthy lifestyle and
Mhm.
the like longevity and maybe like reducing your inflammation or the weight loss and the byproduct of what the blender can be in your life, right? It's like,
Mhm.
don't just sell those like, features and benefits, but like, what is the long term? Like, that's why somebody's buying that blender, right? It is a tool to get to this desired state. And I think, like, again, to your point, like, too often we see ourselves, what we do, in a less than reality of what it is. Like, we are creating a space for people to be able to, do so many different things, whether they're looking for like a cozy and comfortable space in their home where they can relax and get away from life stresses? Or are they looking for a more invigorating space where they can entertain and be creative and be community, build community with their friends and neighbors? And as I'm saying that, like many people listening are thinking of like, oh yeah, like darker colors and lighter colors, and all the different ways that like color theory plays into the emotions that we all experience. And certainly anyone with an interior design background can certainly understand that like that's really what that is. And it is significantly important. I heard something recently that I don't remember, like came from a study that like patients in hospitals that are going through like, just really bad like cancer treatments and stuff have much better outcomes when they have a window in their room and like, a more comfortable and environment versus like no windows, no outside nature, and just like a dreary, drab room. And it's just like that shouldn't make sense. Like it, from a like the same medicine, same like stuff, but the environment that we're in like dramatically affects our life experience. And that's what we do in our industry. And it's just like it's so much more than we're just putting paint on stuff.
Say you're talking to someone, Michael, and they're like, "Look, all that sounds great, but I just got to get some work. Like I've lost the last 5 jobs, and I'm pretty sure it's my price." Like
Yeah,
how often have you? I've heard this so much in my life. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I dealt with this myself. And I'll share my experience. I think I've even shared a little bit. I think like the same, to say what you just said a different way, because I was going to ask you the same thing to like
Hmm.
comment on, is this thought of like, yeah, but if I raise my prices, I'm going to sell less. I'm going to
Yeah,
sell fewer jobs. I can understand where that comes from, right? This basic economics class of supply and demand, and we've seen the lines and all of the things, and I get it. I'm not trying to say that that's like 100% incorrect. I'm saying it's just not a full picture of what's happening. That would make sense if we were selling a commodity to the point you just made, right? Where what we sell is exactly the same as what somebody else sells. It is not. It's not even close. And that we work in a like perfect market where customers have access to all of the different options. They don't. And where customers were logical and they weren't making emotional decisions in things like this that are going to be based on their experience or so many different things. I can speak to my personal experience. When I was a college freshman, I started running my own painting company, like many people in the industry. And at that point, my concept of money was like most college students, maybe a little bit different than it is today. At that point, $50 was a ton of money. And I specifically remember adjusting my prices lower because I knew, like in my being, that there was no one on the planet that would spend more than $3,000 on a paint job. That if I calculated a price, I was using production rates even back then on or pencil and paper. I had to use pencil because there was mistakes. And I would walk around and I'd calculate how many hours it was going to take and figure out my rate, how much I need to charge somebody. And if my price was over $3,000, I would go back through and I would take out some time and figure out a way to get the price to be under $3,000 so I had a chance to book it. I didn't sell that many jobs. I had a really low win percentage. I remember being under 30%. It's a little foggy now, but I remember it
the
being very bad.
dreaded under 30%. That
I,
means you were doing something people didn't like.
yeah, I was really bad. I worked hard. So give me some credit here. I did a lot of door to door marketing, a lot of estimates, and a lot of lowering my price to try to win jobs. And I
Mhm.
didn't win that many jobs. And I probably don't need to say this, but at the end of the summer, I had made no money. So I'd worked really hard and looked up and literally had made no money. So that was super. And biggest thing I realized is I needed to learn how to sell better. I mean, we talk about that a lot. A lot of times, if you're not selling jobs, it's not because your price is too high. It's because the value that your customer is perceiving that you are providing is too low,
Mhm.
which is different than the value you're providing, right? That's that sales skill, is helping a customer to understand the value that you're providing in a super positive way and making sure that it matches what they're looking for.
For sure.
But there's also just a bunch of studies out there. I don't, I didn't do my homework to reference it, but it's like you can do quick studies or a quick search, I should say, to find these studies that show us that like most customers will tell us that the reason they didn't go with us is because the price was too high. And sometimes that's true, but that is often not the case. There are so many other reasons as to why they didn't do it. And then they just justify it with your price was too high, because I think for most customers, it is a non confrontational way to get out of this like sales experience. And the sales rep is just going to go away. I said your price was too high. We're not going with you, because that sounds nicer than I didn't really like you. You didn't give me a good first impression. I don't trust you. I don't think you have a good reputation. Or maybe put a different way is I found somebody who I trust more. They have a better reputation. They gave me better feelings when they were here, and I'm more confident that they're going to be able to do the job. Which, oh, by the way, might actually be more money than what you quoted me.
Mhm.
And I think we both experienced that quite a bit, where we have sold many jobs where we were the highest price.
Absolutely. That's the interesting part about actually asking questions and learning what the customers all like, what they're really trying to get at, right? Like, we're in this unique position, and we're going to get into this about how to price a job for your company, but we're in this unique position in our industry where we build the product while we're with the customer. And so part of it is like we need to understand how to ask the questions of what the customer is really looking for and not assume we know what the product is they want. I think a lot of cases people get this wrong, where they just give a customer, we walk in, we show up, we tell them what we're all about. We assume we know what they want, and we give them what we think they want, versus what oftentimes allows a better sales process is understanding what customers looking for and building that experience as well as the product and building the value. And so that only happens through an actual interaction and this process of really wanting to understand what your customer wants.
Most customers don't even know what they want until they've had a really good conversation with somebody from our
Absolutely.
industry.
Yeah, very valid.
Yeah.
Good point.
Oftentimes we're like the second, I would say our most common experience at our company is we're the first quote somebody gets. We're very responsive, easy to find, do a lot of marketing, things like that. When we're not, if we are the second or third quote somebody's received, we often find that like they have no idea what they're looking for. Nobody's asked them any of the right questions. They don't have any idea what the options might be in terms of products, in terms of timeline. There might be ways to, maybe only certain areas, depending on the type of project, actually or things that you really need to paint, you might be able to get goal that you want, which is to feel more comfortable in this space or to get this problem to go away without having to do exactly what maybe they think they have to do.
I mean, also, this is an interesting point too. When you actually do get honesty from the potential customer, and I've even seen this in my own life when I've been working with people, what we believe is occurring on the outside is not what's occurring for the customer. And that's that they've got this wild price spectrum. Like, it's oftentimes crazy. We'll come into jobs, we'll bid them, and our price might be, let's call it 10,000. There's someone coming in at 20, and there's someone coming in at 2,000, right? Like, we're not talking about like a few $100 difference as why they chose the other person. It's like, it's never that close. And the reason is because I'd like to believe our companies are different, but I think the reality is that so many people need help pricing. And we're going to get into that because people don't understand what a lot of people in my network and people in this industry, when they figure out their price, they figure out their company, everything works. But a lot of people are guessing. And so you're bidding against people who are guessing, people who don't have a system. That's probably, I want to say, unfortunately, really, really high. 95% of contractors in our industry don't have a system. And so when a customer says, well, it's because of the price, it's like, let's talk about that for a second. Is it an $8,000 difference that you're going with here? Because that is a huge difference. Are you concerned about that? Because I know I would be. Like, if you're not, like, what are we doing here? So someone else presented the value that they were willing to resonate with, and maybe they just wanted to spend $2,000 and roll the dice. I don't know.
Sure.
Or maybe they actually chose a $20,000 contractor, which has happened to me, by the way. I've been in bidding situations where we came in at 10, the other contractor came at 50,000. That person chose the 50,000.
Yep.
And that's, to me, I was like, that's crazy. How could they choose that? This is a bungalow. Like, what are they doing? Well, the value resonated with them. Do you think that contractor goes around thinking like, oh man, it's my price why I'm not winning jobs? Maybe, because that's a pretty high price, but he's also getting work in the neighborhood he wants with the customers he wants. And my value didn't resonate with that person.
Well, and I mean, so use that number though, right? Let's just use maybe something that's a little bit maybe closer and just say like it's a $20,000 project and versus a 10, right? That person who's winning that project at 20,000 needs to do half as many projects that you would need to do at 10 to hit their revenue numbers, right? And then we can get to, which is kind of the whole point of this conversation, is like the profitability that should be there. Doesn't necessarily mean it will be, is there's so much greater opportunity for profit on what, at that price point. So fewer customers, fewer headaches, fewer opportunities for problems, and greater opportunities for profit. All seems like a pretty good combination to me.
That's the dream, and I think a lot of us, if you're listening and you're feeling like you need to raise your price, we're going to talk about that. But that equation is like the perfect equation. The worst equation is tons, especially in our industry, which is like an art in a lot of ways. It's like I'm going to go provide art to as many people as possible while making the smallest amount of margin I possibly can, maybe even lose money, just be busy, and then at the end of it be like, well, here's my volume of work I did. Uh, let's talk about, like, I think what's the saying, like volume is vanity, profit is king or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Revenue for vanity and profit for sanity.
There it is. Yeah. So let's should we get into that? Like how do we price these jobs to make sense? Or do you have anything else? So Michael, take us away.
Yeah. I
How
think
did
there's
you go from
a
yeah,
lot of
go ahead.
different ways to think about this. So this is going to be like our math part. So hopefully, for the one person that's still tuned in here,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
it's just
And
like
math
I
is
do.
not a four-letter word, guys. This is your friend.
And I think,
It is a four-letter word.
yeah, there we go. Talking about math. Um, I think the reality is just that, like, this is, I think, where a lot of people in our industry, like, get stuck, where it's like, it does take a little bit of effort. But if we can do it on a podcast, with maybe if you're watching on YouTube or if you're, listening on your, Spotify or your Apple podcast, or whatever, it's just like, imagine like this is so much easier if you're just like grab a piece of paper, you're whiteboarding it, whatever. But it's to the point of like this isn't that hard. So I think let's kind of work our way up from the price. Let's build into our price, and then we can also talk about price in some other ways. Kind of heat check ourselves, and maybe ways that we would think about what happens if we raise our price. So just to be clear, we are going to price based on an employee model. That's what you and I know. Pricing really should be about the same. It's just a slightly different way of describing the expenses.
I want to just explain that really quickly.
Yeah,
I don't think that our pricing model is exactly for employees. We'll talk a bit about that.
fair.
But if you run a sub model, you need to think about what it's like to have employees, because essentially you're just sending that piece out, but you still need to charge appropriately in order to make all this work.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Anyways, back to you.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, the price really should be the same.
Yeah.
If you're doing things the right way, it's, and you're paying people and they're paying their taxes and everybody has insurance and all the different things. It's actually just a different way of slicing up the same pie. There might be reasons to do that to, have a flexible workforce or things like that, which makes a lot of sense. If we're doing it so that we can just like justify paying people less than they're worth or justify not paying taxes, that's not very ethical. And we personally, I hope you leave the industry if that's kind of what your goal is. But maybe we'll save that for a different episode. Okay, so let's kind of get into it. I think the number one expense for a business like ours is going to be labor.
And are we going to talk about percentages here? I mean,
Sure.
obviously, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
What do
give
you
us.
think?
Yeah, I think we both know the same number. Give us
Mhm.
an approximation of labor as a percentage of your revenue.
We go one third.
Yep. So that's a
So
pretty good idea. So we're talking. Are you talking with labor taxes, or let's call that burden?
burden. Yeah. So all in labor rate of percentage of 33%,
Okay.
and that's going to, yeah, your workers comp, your, what else is in there?
Yeah, employment taxes.
Yeah.
Again, obviously, you're in Canada. I'm in the United States. Some of our listeners are in different countries, certainly different states. So everybody's like tax burden in that sense is going to be different, but approximate. So when you take their direct wage plus the cost to employ them on a minimum basic, we're not talking health insurance and stuff yet. That should be about a third, about 33% of your total revenue. So again, first of all, I think we need to maybe just back up a step and define like how we get to this point is just like the average hourly wage.
Hmm.
And so let's just come up with a real number here. So give me some, I got 5 employees that work for us, John. Give me some wages. Let's do this real quick. How much are they getting paid?
So So we got Shelly. She's getting paid $15 an hour. She's new to the industry.
Okay.
We got Marcus. He's making $20. He's in the industry, not quite an expert. Can do most of the major things. And then we've got someone who's more of an expert, $25 an hour.
Okay.
We've got three people on our team.
Okay.
Does that sound about right to you? I mean, I'm making these numbers up.
Sure. Give me two more just for fun. 21 and 18.
Sure. Yeah, 21, 18. Okay.
Okay. And so somebody listening, and this is where, again, sometimes we get stuck. We're having these conversations in person at an expo or something. Like, oh, you can't hire somebody for $15 an hour or $25 an hour. That's too high or whatever. Again, this is fine. You know what you're paying your individual team members to do what they need to do. Substitute the real numbers, but understand the exercise that we're doing here. And all right, so we've got these 5 people. We're going to add that up. So let's grab our cellular telephone devices. 5, 20, 21, 18, and 15. I've got.
And everyone's while you're doing that, Michael, the one thing that I would suggest is if you are running a sub model, or if you're even like just wondering what the average wage is, just go on like Glassdoor or Indeed and look at what people are actually offering and paying. There's a lot of great info on there, give you a good sense of what your market. That's one area where I believe there is a bit more of like a market rate, so to speak, is like you can kind of tell roughly what people are paying.
But,
So anyways,
and I would think at this point, as we're talking here, second half of 2024, in most parts of the country, the average like wage, hourly wage, non-union, kind of company like ours, is somewhere in the neighborhood of like $20 to $30 per hour.
mm-hmm.
I would think some of your coastal cities, your big cities, maybe it's a little bit more than that. Perhaps pushing 35 in some places like New York City or San Francisco as an hourly wage. And I could be way off. We don't work in those areas. I have some access to talk to people that are in those areas, and just like you do with PaintScout and things like that. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's obviously crept up quite a bit over the last over COVID, but yeah, that's roughly what we see.
So in this example, the numbers that you just gave me, that adds up to $99. So when I add the 5 wages, 25, 21, 20, 18, and 15, I get $99 in total. So to get the average, we just have to divide that by the 5, which 99 divided by 5 is just about the same as 100 divided by 5, which we're going to call 20. All right, we're a hair under 20. I'm going to just round it up to 20. And so if we go, so first of all, that is just the wage. And so now we need to add the burden onto that. And it's going to be different everywhere. I would say what I've heard in most places, it's going to be about 20 to 25%.
Exactly what I've heard
Okay.
and experienced.
Right.
There you go.
And so again, this is where we get caught up. You and I are in different countries
Mm-hmm.
with different, experiences here, and it's pretty similar. And so let's just add another $4 or $5 to that for the sake of fun. Let's just make it $5. We're at $25. And so so the cost of labor per hour without extra benefits or anything like that yet is $25. And so if we take that and multiply it by 3 or divide it by a third, give us the same thing, we know that a rough idea, this is not how we come up with a price. We're going to keep working here. But just as we kind of heat check ourselves, anybody that's listening, right, you can figure what is your average wage plus burden, multiply it by 3. And if that's not pretty close to what you're currently charging, especially if that number is higher than what you're currently charging, you really need to raise your price.
Mm-hmm.
So in this situation, we're at $75.
Correct. Yeah, and in a lot of cases, this is it's a good back check, and it might be an indicator of why you're not making the money you're hoping to make. And for those who are wondering where we're going with this, I mean, your hourly wage is a reflection of your whole business, and it works into a production rate model. And that once you figure out the time, you can now multiply it by the dollar per hour, and assuming you get that project done on time, you make the money you were hoping to make. Now, I mean, a couple random things. What if we're assuming everyone's working full time with this model, and so keep that in mind. If if you feel like making a comment down below, like, hey, what if this happens? Like, yeah, you're going to make some adjustments over time. But what we're talking about here is just a a back check of where your rationale is. This isn't meant to be 100% accurate, Michael. I know you're going to talk a little bit more about how to get there, but it's like we need to know at a baseline if we're even in the ballpark
Mhm.
of where we need to be.
Yeah.
Because so many of us don't even know how to get there. So I'm gonna let you keep going.
Yeah, and I think like that's where, again, to your point, like we might get complicated and say, well, what about overtime? It costs more. And it's just like,
Yeah.
sure, we can talk about overtime. It's a kind of a side conversation. But it's definitely not overly significant to understanding, like, am I charging the right price? Okay, cool. So the next, I would say, like, big expense for most painting companies after paying the labor employees is
Dun, 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 paint and materials.
paint and materials. So good old Sherwin-Williams and Benjamin Moore and, all of our friends occasionally raise their prices. I don't know if you've heard that, John.
I've never had a price raise in the last 10 years.
That's amazing.
Maybe
I think
maybe I just not getting the mail. That's
I
the
think that's
problem.
what it is, or they're sending them all to us because
Yeah,
I've
right.
gotten
Yeah.
more than my fair share.
Right.
So, yeah, if we want to better understand that you can run a successful business and raise your prices, look no further than your biggest vendors.
Mhm.
Over the last 4 years, most of us in this industry have experienced something in the neighborhood of like 40+% price increases. You know, go back and look at what you were paying back in 2019 for that, you know, gallon of whatever super paint. See where you're at. Anyways, so what percentage would you expect that to be in a healthy, profitable residential painting company?
I mean, I know it ranges from about 12 to 15%, or 12 to 18, sorry, so I go 15%.
Perfect.
What about you?
It's exactly correct. You nailed it. That would be the correct answer. Good job. You get a gold
Woo!
star.
Let's go.
We are doing well. All right. So we've got 33% going to labor. We've got about 15% going to materials. That is 48%, if I'm doing my math correctly. And we would call that cost of goods sold.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, that's kind of the main stuff there. There's some other small things that you might put into your cost of goods sold, but
And for
with
those who just glazed over when Michael said cost of goods sold, I mean, you can even abbreviate this to COGS, which even more makes my head
getting
spin.
spicy.
But yeah, but what we're trying to get at here is what actually goes into doing the work. So this is the stuff that once the job is actually happening, what are the costs associated with actually making the job?
Yes. And to say it another way, right? These are our variable costs. So if we do more painting projects, we have to have more paint, more labor. If we did less, we would have less materials and less labor. Right? If last year if your company did 100 projects, and maybe this year, we're going to do 80, let's just pretend they're the exact same projects, exact same size, you would expect that you're going to buy less paint, probably about 20% less. And so, that's why these are considered like variable costs, because as the amount of work we're doing goes up, the amount of expenses are going to go up. They fluctuate in pretty much tandem, especially, if we're using production rates and we've got a really good dialed in system as to how we're calculating these things.
So variable, what's the other type of cost, Michael?
That would be known as fixed costs, or
What?
also known as overhead.
What? Whew, okay.
So this is our account. We're just going to call this "Accounting is Fun." That's going to be the name of this episode, and no one's going to listen.
Yeah.
Oh man, good old accounting and making money in our business. All right, so
So what's interesting though, let's just stop here for a second. If you don't care anything more about fixed costs and overhead, the funny thing is you can just take your price of labor and your price of paint, multiply that by two. Hey, and work your way back. But this is going to play into what we previously talked about, which is what kind of business you want to run. And this is where a lot of those costs fit in. So let's talk about that, Michael.
yeah, right. So
Educate us.
yeah, I think people in our industry, hopefully most of the people listening, everything we were just joking about with, understanding overhead and cost of goods sold. A lot of people already understand that. Many people don't, right? When you hear like gross profit or gross margin, that's what we're talking about right now. So gross profit tells us revenue, how much money did we bring in from our customers, minus the cost of goods sold, again, labor and paint. gives us our gross profit, and put that in the form of a percentage, and that would be your gross margin. John, what would you say is a healthy gross margin or gross profit percentage for a profitable business?
45 to 50%.
Okay, great. I think it's certainly possible to get over 50%. I know you would agree
Hmm.
with that.
Absolutely.
I think personally, if you're over 55%, that actually might not be a good sign. And my reason for saying that is you're cutting corners somewhere. Most likely, again, Sherwin-Williams, generally speaking, is going to get their money. It might be in the form of labor. If you're able to like get all these painting projects done and you're using the right best products and things like that, and you're paying your people really well, and you're at 55%, that's awesome. But if we're not paying our employees very well, then what's going to end up happening is they're going to leave, and we are going to pay this cost in the future in the form of turnover. And so, just a quick side note, but 45 to 52, 55%, somewhere in there is like a really healthy benchmark. Obviously that 48 to 52 number, I would say, is like that sweet spot. Resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, like at a basic level, if you're listening and you just want to keep it simple, 35, 15, so 35% labor, 15% materials, 50% gross profit. And now we're talking. Now we can make some money.
And so where does that other 50% go, right? So customer gave us 100% revenue. We spent 50% of it to get the job done. At the end of it, we have 50% gross profit. That's awesome. As business owners, that means we all get to have yachts and, swim in our pool of money.
I have so many yachts, Michael. It's
So
like,
hard
it's
to
hard
keep
to keep
track.
track of
Yeah.
how many I have.
That's what most people think of business owners. Those that are listening that are business owners might be wondering where their yacht is.
Yeah.
John took their yacht.
that's how you get so many yachts.
Yeah, so there's a lot of other things that now have to be paid for.
Yeah.
So what are some of the other things that you want to put into this overhead bucket specifically?
Yeah. So I'm going to list out a bunch, and I think for the sake of this conversation, these are numbers that you're going to want to get from your accountant, and this is kind of something they can provide. Those other ones we talked about are ones that you can pretty quickly calculate per job, but we're talking about things like marketing, office expenses, vehicles, insurance, licensing, phones, any type of overhead labor, and that's going to be management.
Wait. Are we supposed to pay ourselves as business owners? What is this crazy talk?
This is a wild concept. I
I
know.
thought as business owners, we don't just make profit.
Well, not if you want to ever sell your business, Michael, or
Tell me more.
invest back to your business.
What if I want to
Yeah, so
hire like salespeople? They might fall into this category.
they fall into this category. So these are the people and any labor that goes into managing the company. And this is a little bit of a different concept. You might have someone that answers phones. They don't actually do the job. They're an overhead expense. You might have someone that is managing crews but not painting. That might be an overhead expense, as well as accounting, management of other areas of your business, that type of stuff. And part of it is that we all need to play a role in our business. If you are not doing anything, well, then maybe you should just take a bit of profit. But most of us have roles in our business. We need to compensate ourselves for those roles in order to make sure that we can replace ourselves one day. Is that a wild concept, Michael?
For me or for too many people?
I mean, I don't know. It
That's
was a
my
wild
goal.
concept for me for a long time. So,
I hear you.
yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, again, I shared the story at the beginning of the episode. Like there was no making money.
Yeah.
Profit. I mean, man, me taking a salary. Whew, that was,
Right.
yeah, that wasn't happening. But no, 100%. So, and there's a lot of different tax implications, and there are some strategies behind this. But as a business owner, you should be able to afford to pay yourself a good salary. That might be, again, depending on where you live, somewhere between, I don't know, 75 and $150,000. Seems like a
Mhm.
pretty decent thought.
Yep. And so, I mean, we want to obviously keep this pretty simple today, I think, without getting too far into the weeds of it. How do we attribute this other 50% into our hourly wage?
Um,
Or hourly wage, sorry, the hourly rate we're charging.
Yeah, I mean, so again, you mentioned it before. I mean, you can simply just double, if you go backwards to what we were talking about before. I mean, once we know kind of what our labor cost is, and, you know, we can triple that. Once we know our labor plus our materials, we can double that. And that's going to get us pretty close. When we think about what we can afford to spend on overhead, so if we take that revenue minus cost of goods sold equals our gross profit, minus our overhead equals our net profit.
You lost me.
Okay, net
Say that
profit.
again.
You weren't paying attention.
I wasn't paying attention.
So that's our net profit, right? And so that's like the whole point of doing this, is also known as you need to be running a profitable business. Why? Okay, I'm gonna ask you two questions. We're gonna come back to the first ones. Why is it good to run a profitable business for everyone besides the business owner? So I think if you're the business owner, I think you understand why having a profitable business probably makes sense. But it's actually really important for everybody else involved here, your employees, your vendors, your customers. Let's come back to that. And quickly, what's a good profit percentage here? What's reality in our industry? Give me a benchmark.
So I think the reality, we'll start with that, is way too low. If you're making a profit, it might, like, to me, this is going to sound crazy, but to me, anything below 10% is a challenge. I mean, this is not going to offer you the opportunity you need to grow, provide opportunity, all that kind of stuff. Am I off base, Michael? What do you think?
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
The reality in our industry, in all industries really, is that like not every year is going to be the same profitability. There are
Mhm.
going to be some years where things are more profitable than others. Again, vendors raising prices, wage inflation, just pressure on overhead expenses and things like that might cause you to go below 10%. Again, that happens for sure. But as if we were to look over like the course of 10 years, we need to be averaging over 10% throughout that time in order to be able to reinvest back into the business and grow and do all these things that we should probably now talk about.
For sure.
So why is
Yeah.
profit important?
I mean, there's so many reasons. I mean, I think you talked a little bit about why it's important for like all stakeholders in the business. And I think, opportunity, being able to reinvest in people, being able to offer an environment that people want to work in. These are really important things. And that comes from reinvestment of profit. Like if you're trying to buy vehicles, upgrade vehicles, where's that money going to come from? It has to come from some retained earnings or something else. And so that's a big reason. I mean, the second thing is just like starting a business is a big risk. Whether we're not talking about that right now, like everyone's probably listening, like, well, was it a risk? I don't know. I just feel like something I should do. The reality is that it is a risk. It's a risk reward system. And without a reward, this doesn't work for the risk you're taking. We should be working in other businesses to make money. This whole business adventure needs to have that in order to make sense.
Yeah, and I mean, that's just, even specifically talking about that, right? You talked about insurance before, right? That's part of our risk mitigation strategy.
Mhm.
But sometimes that doesn't cover it all, right? Sometimes the risk is just like I said before, you know, economic trends and things like that, where we might experience a couple years even in a row of, not making profit there, or losing money, right? I again shared my experience. Like I had plenty of years of losing money, most of them in my
Yep.
first 12 years of doing this. And if I'm not making good, healthy profit in the good years, I don't have the money to set aside into a savings account so that I can afford to take care of my people and pay my bills and take care of my family in the years that we aren't making that profit. And if I'm an employee and I'm working somewhere that they aren't doing that, one, I probably don't know it. And two, if I did, I should be very scared because it's a house of cards. It's only a matter of time. Yes, it worked. This business works great as long as every customer pays. That doesn't happen.
Mhm.
And nothing bad ever happens and no jobs go sideways and, there's never any problems. It's like, if you've been doing this more than 2 weeks, you probably know that that's not the reality of the situation.
I was gonna say 2 days, but
Okay.
yeah, it's generous.
I
It's
was
generous.
somebody's probably had a good 2 week start.
A few couple good days. At least they haven't run their job costing yet, so they don't actually know. But
Well, yeah. Why? Well, yeah. Why do customers want to hire a company that is profitable?
well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that you're gonna be around in 2 years
That's a good start.
because that whole trust thing we're talking about, that whole reputation thing we're talking about, that doesn't happen without time. And if you're gonna provide a warranty and you're not gonna be around in 2 years, what use is that warranty? I also think that, like, I'm a big believer in culture, right? Like, the culture of a work environment affects everybody. And in a positive one, it's great. It's so much better to work together in that environment. And that takes reinvestment. That, that there's a cost to staying relevant. And I think it's something we so rarely consider that, like, it's easy to think of this as a short-term game, but it's actually a really long-term game. And profit is one of those things that allows you to play the game properly for a longer period of time.
Yeah, I mean, right, and it gives you the ability to reinvest. It's like part of our, I don't know, human condition, I guess, that our expectations are going to go up as employees, as customers, et cetera, et cetera. And if we're going to be able to keep up with those things and invest in the technology that customers are going to want, invest in, you mentioned before vehicles or employee benefits or things like that, we have to be able to do that by making profit, raising our prices, et cetera, et cetera.
So here we've got the whole picture. I mean, you've got labor, we've got materials, we got our overhead, we got our profit. Is there anything we need to know, like, here to put this all together, you think, Michael?
I'm not sure I follow your question. What are you thinking there? I guess maybe give me
So
some.
yeah, so for those listening, you're thinking, like, what's my hourly rate? Like, how do I know that I'm charging the right amount? And I'm just going to help out with the question.
Perfect.
Part of it is that I mentioned this earlier. Like, you have to have a bit of experience, a bit of, some projects have to have happened in order for you to start seeing if these numbers are playing out properly or where you need to make adjustments. And so that's an accounting function. And the other thing, so you can start looking at your accounting numbers and know your numbers. And I know for a lot of people that's hard. And I'd encourage you to find a good accountant and find a way to track this stuff because that's really where the gold is. Like, if you want to figure out how to make it work, we need to know what's currently working or not working and move that forward. But I would say, to our earlier point, the thing that you were talking about, which is the average hourly wage, if you're new to the industry or if you're trying to figure this out or even just back check what you're doing, that's such a great place to start. These other numbers should flow out of that, really. And so if you're in a lot of cases, there's going to be some percentages in the overhead that you're going to try to hit. And those are in relation to the amount of work you're probably going to try to do. Caveat there is that, like, there's going to be like points in the business where you have to add overhead and you're not going to get the same bang for your buck. It takes a little bit of time to actually, bring up your revenue to that point. But the thing that I would take away from this is that find your average labor rate, multiply that by three and see where you stand, and then look at some historical data if you have it and see how you're actually doing. And the way to do that is to this is a pretty simple equation as well, find out how many total hours have been worked over a time period and how much revenue you made in that time period. Divide the amount of revenue by the amount of hours. That's going to tell you how much you charge per hour. So that's really what I was getting at. I
Got
just
it.
want to bring this all together for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love it. I mean, I think the going back to the idea we said before is that like in most parts of the country, the average hourly wage in 2024 is somewhere in the like low 20s to low 30s, kind of what we talked about before. Call it, roughly 20 to 30. And so, we add a few bucks to that, and we're going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 35, maybe 40, although that seems high, but I'm sure in some, metros that's maybe accurate with labor burden. So like that 25 to 35, maybe 40 times three, right? And so what's that giving us is somewhere between 75 and 100, maybe as much as 120, 115, somewhere in there. that's a pretty good idea of what a labor rate looks like, hourly charge rate in 2024. Sorry, not labor rate, your sales rate in 2024. That's how much you should be charging per hour. And so somebody charging, let's just use that 75, right? If somebody's charging less than 75, they better have a lot less overhead, and they, need to make sure though that they're making enough profit to invest in the future overhead. That's one of the biggest problems I see is like you could get away with charging maybe 60, $65 an hour in, some of like the mid-size, areas like maybe Cleveland or whatever, where cost of living is less. You can, your average hourly wage might be 20 bucks, like we were talking about before. So you can get away and you can like not lose money at $60 an hour. But the problem is that you're not making enough profit to invest in the future overhead that you need and want to be able to grow your business. How are you going to hire that salesperson? How are you going to hire that office admin or the production, supervisor, or to rent that office or shop, to buy those new vehicles? All those things we talked about before are overhead. And so in order to do that, you have to raise your price, and then, you know, raise the price, work on enough jobs, get that profit, and then you have that money to be able to go afford those things or people. And that's where I think, like, again, we talked about at the beginning, it's not a how low can I charge. It doesn't necessarily have to be how much can I charge, but it's just like, what is the right price is the thought process that we need to be thinking about here.
So let's move this forward a little bit further. So say you've gone through this process. You've now followed the math with us. You managed to push through, got it down. You have a rough idea of how much you charge per hour. You need to think about now how this impacts getting the price for your job. And this is really where production rates come in. We've done a couple other videos on this and how that actually works. Michael, for you and your transition from not profitable to profitable, was all of your issue in the hourly wage, or was it in the production rates? Or walk us through how these things play together.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was both, right? So
Yeah.
we, as we started to realize, like, hey, we need to raise our prices, right? There are two components to the price: how many hours and how much per hour. If we're going very simple, how many hours times the price per hour equals the price. Sure, we can get complicated with how we charging for materials and whatever, but again, for what we're doing today, we're going to keep things pretty simple. Um, and so what we realized is that it's, and for I think most people that I've ever helped with, looked at their accounting with, and things like that in our industry, it is always both. There's always an opportunity in both places. We need to probably be charging for some more hours. We also need to be charging more per hour. And you mentioned the words before, job costing. That's really where that's going to come from. If your crew is getting the project done on time, this was a 100-hour project. They got it done in 100 or 105 or 95 or something pretty close to what we thought it should take. Then we know we're charging for the right number of hours. And then if we're not making profit after that point, it's because we're not charging enough per hour. Again, if we're charging $60 an hour and our average labor wage per hour is 30, you're not going to make money. It isn't a number of hours problem. Actually, selling more hours just means you're going to go out of business faster, which I think is maybe something we should talk more about. I'll say that again: staying busier, put that another way, selling more painting jobs that are not profitable just helps you go out of business faster. So anyways, yeah, I mean, that was, I think, like the big realization, specifically for us, like, and this is the fun of job costing and having software like PaintScout, is like it allowed us to be more granular. It's not just more hours, like that's kind of broad, but it was like more specific hours in the space of like prep work and setup and cleanup. That like once our painters were painting, they could paint that window in the amount of time, or they could paint that door, or that, square footage of siding, or whatever it is. But it was just taking them longer to get to that point at the beginning of the day, or to clean up the supplies and the equipment at the end of the day. And so, when you sometimes on smaller jobs, we didn't really see it, right? Because you'd only be there for a day or two. And that part that we had undercharged for, like that setup and cleanup at the beginning and end of every day, wasn't really that significant over 2 days. But if it was like a 2-week project, well, now each one of those, like, off by a couple hours per day, let's just say we were 4 hours low per day, you know, in those 2 days, that might only be 8 hours, but over the course of 10, now all of a sudden we're talking 40 hours. That's a huge difference of profitability.
In my experience, so production rates were critical in terms of having control over the number of hours. And so for those listening who aren't familiar, production rate is just an amount of time associated to different tasks that we do. So how much work can you do? How much drywall can you paint in an hour? How much window trim can you paint in an hour? That kind of stuff. And it allowed us to get control over the actual production process and what that meant for our company. And now we can watch and adjust and control that through a system. And our salespeople can sell, using PaintScout. They can sell a job and be confident in knowing that their hours are fairly right. And because they have an hourly rate that we've actually calculated that we know is reflective of our values and our business, compare those two things and get a price in minutes, which is revolutionary for a lot of customers. And that is such a unique thing that's weirdly hidden in our industry. But that is the equation that has worked for us, that's worked for you, Michael, and has worked for thousands of top contractors. It's just not talked about a lot. And so we're happy to share that and answer any questions. Leave them in the comments below. Feel free to get the algorithm to let other people know about this stuff. That's the right approach here, guys, because people need to know.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, this needs to not be the secret sauce.
Yeah.
I think what I realized that this is the secret sauce, that this is the right thing. Once I started to get around successful business owners in our industry, I realized that was oh, they're charging the right price and they know their numbers, and they're, knowing your numbers, production rates, charge rates, basic accounting. That's the difference. And it's not that hard. And there's a lot of people that you can bring in and very low cost ways to help you with that.
Charge more,
definitely
learn the numbers, run a profitable business, and you're gonna be happy.
This podcast is proudly powered by PaintScout, your partner in painting success.